Hello, I'm Carol Harvey, and I'm happy to be here and offer you my ideas on planning a learning centers unit for your English language students. This unit is great because a learning centers unit can be so easily adapted to students of any language ability. I've used it from the primary ages up to using it with my university students in the English for Academic Purposes program, and it's not hard to make adjustments. You have handouts from me, I believe, and I just wanted to fill in a bit more detail about some of the ways you might use centers. So that's what this short video is about. Now let me share my screen. So what I'm going to talk about today could be used for high school students or middle school students, and you would just need to adjust accordingly. And you've seen the handout, so I think you know what I mean by centers. And this is where students are going to rotate. You put the desks together or the tables around the room so that they are grouped in centers and they rotate from one center to another. Each center has a specific task that they need to complete while they are working at that center. Depending on the time and depending on your students, you might want to have them spend one full period at a center and then move to the next one. If I think about half an hour, if it's their first time and if they're not really strong, probably 40 minutes or so in a center is a good time. If you have a period of 45 minutes, then they could spend one period at each center. And if you have 4 centers, then over 2 weeks, they would complete the rotation. There are different reasons for using centers, and one of the readings I suggested actually has centers in a science teacher. But I'm going to suggest that your goals, if you haven't used them before, are the last 2 in this list. You want to add some variety, something new for the students, and also use it to review and extend the learning, what they've already know. And so for me, I like to use centers maybe once a term. If you use them too often, then the novelty and enjoyment is not as high, I think. And it was a change for my students. So I like to use it at the end of each term, maybe three or 4 times a year. Really, the success of the centers, I must say, it usually depends on the amount of preparation that the teacher has done preparing the students, not so much what's in the center, the tasks, but how much training the students need and how much they have had as to how to work in centers. I'm going to talk a bit more about that as we go along. For the purposes of explaining this a little more, I'm going to assume you have 4 centers and 4 groups of 4 students. Now, you may have many more students than that. Just to explain it, we're going to imagine that there are 16 students in your class and that you have grouped them in groups of 4. And so for the purposes of this model, there are 4 different centers. How many centers you actually have depends on the space, depends on the time, and depends on your students. So you will have 4 centers and 4 groups. Now, if it's your very first time, and if it's your student's very first time, the easiest way to do it might be doing a writing center and a reading center. If you have the equipment or the technology, you could also do a listening center. But then add one other center. Games or art are good centers to start with. And the format, you could have baskets or file folders, because when students come in, one student, the runner of your group, will come up to you and say, today we are in center 3. And so you would hand them the folder for that center, and they would take it back to their group. Now, you might need to spend a couple of weeks in advance preparing the students. It's a good idea to take some time, because if your students are at least similar to the language students I know, they might be good students at reading or writing, doing seat work, filling in activities, but to actually speak is much more challenging, especially for middle school students or early high school. Now, if your students are that much more further advanced, that's great. Then you won't have too many considerations to worry about. But what you want to do in, say, 2 weeks ahead of time is start building up some anticipation. You say, we're really going to do something different the last week of school before holidays. We are going to have a centers unit. You should choose the groups, and you choose them based on what you know about them. Will they work reasonably well together? No student should feel left out. Are there a mix maybe of both capable and students and others who might need more support? And then if they're not with their best friend, they're more likely to take this task seriously. Maybe. You will know your students, but I do think that it's a good idea, particularly for the first time, to say, for this time, I am choosing who is in the groups, what students will work together, and we will see how it goes. And maybe the next time we have a centers unit, you will have more say in the matter. So there are particular roles for the students and particular routines as well. If you have 4 students, I would suggest you have a group leader, a secretary, a runner, and a timekeeper. And those 4 roles change every day, so that by the end of having completed 4 centers, they will have experienced being in all 4 roles. So you need to have the last day before you start, you need to have them sort out who will be the group leader to begin with, who will be the secretary for the first center, who will be the runner, and who will be the timekeeper. And then they just rotate them. If they are the leader the first day, the second day they are the secretary. If they are the timekeeper the first day, the next day they are the leader, and so on, just going around that list. The responsibility of the leader is to greet the group and to say, all right, this is our task for today, and read out the task, and then direct the turns. Who will start? And okay, let's have next. And at the end, thank the group. So the leader is basically the facilitator to make sure that the task is accomplished. The secretary is the one that fills in the form that's on the beginning and ensures that if they have to do a worksheet where there are things that they are doing as a whole group, that the secretary would be the one to do the writing for that group, for that center. The runner is the person who goes up, gets the particular folder, goes to the seat of their group, and then at the end returns the folder complete with the work that they have done back to the teacher. The timekeeper's job is to keep everyone on task and make sure they know how much time they have left. So I've spoken a little bit about how to enter the class. At the end of every period, they make sure they know which table they're going to or which group they're going to for the next period. How do they enter the class? They walk in to their particular center, they sit down, and they wait until the runner has brought their folder and handed it to the leader. Again, at the end, the secretary puts the material in the folder. The secretary can be the one that distributes the material. The leader is the one that explains the task and gets it started, facilitates the group, and ends the session. The leader would say, all right, now it's time that we clean up. And then the runner is the one that takes the collected work back to the teacher at the end. If the students are not very comfortable using English orally when they haven't done something like this before, then you need to practice ahead of time. And you can make this language that they need as simple as possible. Students need to understand they are not able to discuss something at the same level that they can in their own language, and that you know that, and that their task in this English class is to practice English. So if they were really beginning students, the leader would say, good morning, I am the leader today. This is our task, and then would read it out. Now, you can have this language posted on your screen, or you can have it included in the folder. What would they say? How can they say it simply? So they might say, I agree because, and then you would give different possible answers on your screen so that they have language and they would practice it. Or, what do you think? I like it. I don't like it. That's interesting. That's boring. That's difficult. Make your sentences very simple and have your students practice them ahead of time. And then if they're more advanced, you can use some of the examples on my slide. What about assessment and evaluation? You need to explain to the students that you will be collecting their work at the end of each period. So the work from Center 3, at the end of the day, the group that did Center 3, you take out their work, put it aside. They need to have their names on it, and then add what sheets need to be put in for the next group. And the students are also going to do self-evaluation sheets and center evaluation sheets. In other words, did they like the center? You will get some feedback. Was it too difficult? You can tell them, I haven't done this before. Maybe my center will be, maybe the task will be too long for you to finish. You can let me know on the evaluation sheet. And it's also your call, but maybe that would be the one place where if they don't have the language, they can explain more their evaluation in Spanish. But that's a slippery slope, so you have to decide ahead of time. So this would be an idea and a possible model for a center evaluation. And you would have 4, if you have 4 in a group, you would have 4 of those sheets each day put into this folder. And then at the end, they would give the date. This would be for Center 3 reading, and they would list the group members, and then they could just circle. Was it easy, medium, difficult? And then I give this center 7 out of 10 because it was fun, or 9 out of 10 because it was awesome, 2 out of 10 because it was too hard. Did you finish the task, or did your group finish the task? Yes or no? And then other comments. My role at this center was runner. My score, that's what they give themselves. 10 out of 10 because they completed their task. Or 8 out of 10. They were the timekeeper, but they forgot to keep track of the time. But let's look a little bit more at a closer few details that you might think about when you're making your centers. I want to start with a reading center. Ideally, in a reading center, you're not using the same books that you use in class on a regular basis. You're giving them something new. Magazines, cookbooks, comic books. But once you have done a few rounds of centers, you want to start collecting things like stories that students have written in their writing center. And then next time, put those stories in the reading center so that your students can read what their classmates have written. And you can explain to them ahead of time that's going to happen. I do have 3 possible resources. Breaking News English is a good one. And I just want to give you a quick look. And the story I picked from that is Bees and Balls, because according to the story, bees like to play and they enjoy playing with balls. It's also a site you could have the students read the story the night before as homework and come prepared so that they would circle any words they don't know and check on the meaning. It's certainly a site worth looking at. Now, if you want to give students something that they haven't likely used before in class, I enjoyed this story called Stories for Teenagers, and that's on YouTube. So if there's any way that they can view together the story where they are reading at the bottom, but really the visual cues. This is the printed form of the story. It's a genuine fairy tale. Again, that could be printed out. And I want to mention before I forget that this is not, that there are some fairy tales on this site that you may not feel are appropriate for a school setting. And so be sure and check it out before you assign it in class, which I know you would do anyway. Okay, so that's a final comment is that WordWall is a great free resource. I use it all the time for the teachers that I work with. You can make your puzzles, you can make word searches, you can make sentence jumbles where they have to put the sentence in the right order. And so you can make those easily and use those in your reading center if these other options don't work for you. The writing center, it's sometimes good to give them pictures. You might put 4 pictures, 1 for each student, or you might have them all do the same picture and put a picture with a lot of detail. And then students work together. The students that are not as strong, have them work together to complete lists of words that would describe the picture. For example, 10 nouns, 10 adjectives, and so on. And then other more advanced students have them write a story together about the picture. Advanced students can also do something like how to make a cake, how to clean your room. And again, you may need to give them vocabulary that they would need. Include a vocabulary sheet with visuals in the folder so that they can use that. Give them sentence patterns, give them templates. If they aren't able to write a story yet on their own, give them the beginning, the middle, and the end, and then where they just have to add words to make their own story. An art center can be fun. Even adults like to color, right? So I've just got a few examples here to show you. If you're going to make a calligram is where you take the letters of the word and put it in the shape. So this is a pizza, or a piece of pizza. You can see this is the P for pizza, then the I, then the two Z's, and then the A. That's a calligram. If you show them examples ahead of time, then it will be their turn to make a calligram. The students I worked with enjoyed that. And you put in your art center, you put the markers and the paper and whatever art supplies they need for the center. Now I'm going to show you some examples of a shape poem. A shape poem is when they write their story in the shape of the subject. So a tall, lonely oak tree, winds howl, leaves shake, acorns clatter down to the dry ground. You might give them a few poems and ask them to make them into appropriate shapes. A game center, you probably have something like bingo or Pictionary or crossword puzzles. But if you don't, it's easy to make some that are appropriate for your class with a center such as wordwall.net. Now, I want to end by saying it's a lot of work, of course, but after you've done one, it gets to be much, much easier because you just need to tweak your centers. Your job during the centers is to circulate, to tell them you are watching how well they are reading the directions. Do you give them a grade at the end? That's your call. It might be more appropriate to say, I want to see that you have completed the tasks or that you are working on the tasks, that what we are reviewing will help you for next week's quiz or next week's test. You need to decide what's the most appropriate. You can certainly tell them that you are keeping track of whether the work is completed, and then you will, in fact, read over what they've done and decide ahead of time and let them know whether you are going to be giving them a grade for that. My other suggestion for the first time is that you sit down with other teachers and each of you prepare one center and then share that with your colleagues, because that gives you ideas you might not have thought of. It gives you the opportunity to really discuss what can your students do and what can they not. And it saves you a lot of work. You always could take this center idea and then modify it if someone else has prepared it to make sure it fits your class. I'm looking forward to meeting you at the time of the conference and responding to any questions you might have. I hope this has been useful. All right, bye for now.